Well, okay. I think everything is ready for me to record this video lesson where I'm going to write a sample for you, but it's not just a sample, it's also the way I will explain what globalization is that might be helpful in your IELTS preparation. Because here, globalization is a key word in this particular task too. But in reality, it's one of the biggest general topics that you should cover because I know reading passages about globalization. I know listening tests where globalization is the key. I know some speaking questions in part three specifically about globalization. So, those of you who want seven and more, those of you who want the best ideas ready in their mind, I think they should know what globalization is. And today I'm here to explain it. I'm here to simplify it, I would say, and write a beautiful sample for this particular topic. Now, first of all, before I write a sample, I think it's just important to take this word and explain it in the simplest way possible. And the way I will do it is use the word connection. And if I had to use an example, like an early example from history when it comes to globalization, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Silk Road. And some of you might have heard about that name because Silk Road was one of those roads in the past that connected, let's say, different cities and allowed people to do business. That's an earlier example. And now globalization basically describes what the world has become because it's one connected place. That's why the easiest thing I could do is just to think about globalization as connection, connection between cities, connection between countries, connection between, I'm going to say continents too, you know, businesses, um, let's say, etc. Basically, connection. Now, the other thing we have to consider is it always a positive connection? Is this like a positive phenomenon? And this is where people might have their disagreements because the connection can always go in two different ways. Because when I'm talking about the Silk Road and when I'm talking about doing business with a foreign country that is located in a different continent, I think that's beautiful as a business person for you to be able to do business with totally different people from different parts of the world. Is that a good connection? Yes. Does that help you make money? Absolutely. So because you live in this connected world where things are easier. However, if you think about connection in the sense of being too close to each other or being too dependent on each other, and this is where I could go for the word globalization in the second meaning, which is dependency, you know, here I could go for the example of, for example, COVID-19, where the world has become so connected that a virus can spread throughout the whole world in a matter of a month or two or maybe more. I don't have the facts ready. I don't remember exactly how much time it took for COVID-19 to become a pandemic, but we all remember how quick it was when it comes to spreading from one city to another, from one country to another, and the whole world suffered because of that virus that originates in one place and spreads throughout the world. Why? Because we also depend too much on each other. And this connection now can also be viewed in a negative sense, as you can see. And it's actually really true about many IELTS topics, and that's why they will have moments where they ask you, do you agree or do you disagree? And today I have to do that as well. But when it comes to dependency, and maybe not dependency, maybe I should have chosen a different word, but okay, we'll keep dependency here. When it comes to dependency, it is the connected infrastructure, right? It's more traveling, I would say. And it is also the open borders sometimes. open borders that make things way too connected because we are too dependent. For example, we do business with China, we do business with India, we do business with Russia, we do business with the United States, and we have people traveling from one country to another. We have visas available to all of these people. So if something happens in their country and if they get sick, they come to our country. And if something happens in our country and we are sick, right, we go to their country. And this is how, for example, the virus can spread around the world. And this is me just using the simplest example I can think of when it comes to certain disadvantages of globalization. But in this question over here, they're saying, do you agree, disagree? And they're saying, to what extent do you agree, disagree? And here, when I use the word dependency, it's not just COVID-19, obviously. What I try to say here is also being too dependent economically on other countries when you do too much business with them and don't develop your own business at all. And that's why some countries have tariffs now, where they want to support local businesses and not support the foreign businesses, which is also, if you think about it, logical, right? And that's why here now, finally, when I read this topic, it's going to be clearer because they said there's no doubt, it's a fact, there's no doubt that globalization has benefited the world by bringing together people, businesses, and nations. That's very true, especially in terms of money and in terms of the politics and the freedom and connection and communication. People who criticize it stand in the way of progress. So basically, if I have to paraphrase that, a person who wrote this meant people who are against globalization are against progress. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Now, as much as I want to support local businesses, as much as I do understand why people would criticize globalization, I would still believe that in this position over here, it's much easier to agree mostly or mostly agree, whatever you call that position. And I would probably use 2 or 3 main bodies to explain myself in this context. If I want to, I can explain why people criticize globalization. And then in the second main body, I could describe my position where I say, still, the connection that globalization brought is undeniably, no doubt, right? Undeniably massive. It connected us as people. It connected our businesses. It helps us make money. So why would we stop it right now and just isolate ourselves from the rest of the world, where it seems like almost every country is opening up and wants to do business with other countries? Now that we have these definitions available, now that we have these words like dependency and, for example, connection available, we can build arguments, hopefully, and I am going to do that. I want to write this essay in a relatively fast way, and whenever there is a need to explain myself, I will explain myself. Your job is to prove to me that you have a good attention span in 2026 to be able to watch this essay being built from 0 to 100. And there's no better way of explaining the essay than writing it from the very beginning till the very end. So let's try to make this happen. First thing we do, I think everybody knows, task 2 requires us to paraphrase this statement. They said there's no doubt, so I say undoubtedly. As you guys remember, the B is silent, undoubtedly. I'm going to say this. I like this word. It could be my favorite word in English, unprecedented, which means something that never happened before. So what I'm trying to say here is, undoubtedly, globalization has had an unprecedented impact on the world by connecting, because they said bringing together people. So I'm just going to say connecting people, companies, and countries. Now, some of you might disagree with me and say, why are you paraphrasing nations as countries is not the same thing. But I would actually say maybe it's not the same, but it's very similar. And it's certainly not a mistake because country is a nation in many senses. And nation sometimes is something that we just refer to as a country. So it's not a huge difference, although some of you might look into some dictionaries and tell me that they're very different. I wouldn't agree. It's still okay to paraphrase nation as a country. That is totally fine. So we have people, companies, and countries. We have the world connecting instead of bringing together. And we have to paraphrase this part as well. What I'm going to say is this. Those, because it's people, and I already use people. So I'm going to say those who oppose globalization are the ones standing in the way of progress. And this is interesting because I'm not necessarily paraphrasing all of these words, but I am using a slightly different grammatical structure, which is also a form of paraphrasing if you think about it. And now we have these two beautiful sentences, slightly paraphrased, and now we have to show the examiner what the position is. And my position today is going to be very clear. I would love to write 3 or 4 main bodies because I actually prefer larger essays, but I don't want to make this too difficult for you. So we'll go with a classic 2 main body approach. And here's what I'm going to do. I mostly agree with this view since globalization results in more benefits than, we can say more benefits than negatives, maybe that's what we can say. So I mostly agree with this view since globalization results in more benefits than negatives. Actually, in my real exam, I would maybe go further and mention the benefits and negatives right here in what we call the thesis part. But it's okay to miss these words as well because anyways, I'm going to talk about them in main body 1 and main body 2, and I'm doing the classic approach today. So again, I don't want to make this too difficult for you. Let's go ahead with negatives first. And that's actually what I would advise to many people. Because if you mostly agree that the globalization is a good force, you want to have that in the second main body, not the first. Because first you want to talk about the view you disagree with. This is a classic position. That's why over here, I would definitely start with the negatives, maybe have 2 of them, and we can talk about this dependency over here, being dependent too much. We can talk about the COVID-19 if we want to. So let's see how I can do that. Let's go with business and dependency first. Common arguments against, let's say, globalization include being too dependent on, let's say, too dependent on other countries or being too connected to them. It could be dependent, it could be connected over here. Now, because I have these 2 key words like too dependent and too connected, I have to explain both of them. And I want to start with economically, because that's what I mean when I say too dependent. Economically, in this new globalized world, smaller countries might become too dependent on, let's say, on businesses. I want to say that originate from foreign countries, but maybe that's not the best way to say it. Let's go back and let's say economically in this new globalized world, countries, especially smaller ones, might depend too much on foreign investment. And companies that originate, let's say, originate from developed states what I'm trying to say here is all of those powerful corporations that are going to have their offices around the world and benefit from different countries. That's what I'm trying to say when I mean companies that originate from developed states. But overall, this is the economic sense of it. And I don't think this sentence is enough. And that's why I'll probably do one more and say, when the country, or maybe I should say, in this scenario, we can do that as a linking word, interesting linking word. So in this scenario, a country might not develop its own or might not support its own local businesses and instead strive to do business with foreign ones. And maybe because I said do business, I have to paraphrase businesses here to companies. And I think that's going to be much better. So now let's try to read these two sentences and see if it made sense. Economically, in this new globalized world, countries, especially smaller ones, might depend too much on foreign investment and companies that originate from developed states. Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, it's a little bit awkward, so I will change it later. In this scenario, a country might not support its own local companies and instead strive to do business with foreign ones. Right, so going back here, instead of saying this, maybe I could say depend too much on foreign investment and allow global corporations to thrive in many international markets. That's much better. Thrive means to do really well financially. And now I'm saying in this scenario, a country might not support its own local companies and instead strive to do business with foreign ones. As you can see, that's economically. In terms of healthcare, there are some risks too, right? And we can go ahead with the example of COVID-19 and say the COVID-19 pandemic, right? The COVID-19 pandemic spread worldwide in a matter of months, specifically because the world was a connected place. If there were, let's say, more boundaries, or maybe we can say, because of this, many people still believe that this new level of connection is not desirable. But now, this is not my opinion, you guys remember that. And I have to remind the examiner that my opinion is a little different and perhaps better. And that's why we need a transition between this main body and what I'm going to write. And that is why a really good linking word is needed. And maybe that linking word is nevertheless. Nevertheless. Globalization is a positive force that should be, I'm going to say, celebrated in many more ways, right? In many more ways. And we can say, in an economic sense, it helped many countries attract investment, right? Attract investment and develop various, let's say, markets inside the country. So I'm trying to say that economically there are many opportunities. And yeah, I mean, you can say that we still need to support local businesses, but first of all, to develop the local markets generally, you would still need a lot of investment. And sometimes that investment only comes from some other countries and corporations. So I'm saying generally, We still need globalization. We still need this connection between different countries and developed countries to help us a little bit in this sense. So in an economic sense, because I already said economically, this is my way to paraphrase it, as you can see. It helped many countries attract investment and develop various markets inside the country. Without such investment, right, there may be no starting point. Let's say there may be no starting point in the progress of certain countries. That's debatable, but that's my opinion, since it is the opinion essay, as you guys can see. I can say that, no problem. But I'm sure many people would say that it's not true and maybe have their own examples. But still, this is economic. In terms of communication, I'm going to say, and cultural exchange, globalization has changed the world in many ways, making people more tolerant. I think it's true, making people more tolerant and, let's say, understanding. English as the as the new global language, right? As the new global language, let's say, removed certain communication barriers, right? Barriers, helping people connect with foreigners faster. We can say faster, we can say better if we wish. So now we have the communication and we have the economic sense. What else can I say? I wonder. What else can I say? By the way, I just want to check how many words I have already. 234. Right. And actually, I could say this. In such a globalized, or let's say in such an environment, isolation might, or let's say isolation is often dangerous, right? With some countries, being a testament to this. You know what I'm trying to say here? We do have some countries in this world that are very isolated and they don't want to do business with other countries. They want to close their borders. They want to have total control of their entire populations. I don't want to go with examples here because I feel like it's going to be a little controversial, but you guys know what I'm talking about. That's why I'm saying that these countries that want to close themselves and not open up to the world, they don't do well economically most of the time. Of course, you can come up with some exceptions, but historically, especially recently, closed countries that don't want to open up to the world, that don't want to do business with others, are the ones that suffer in many ways, including economy. That's why I said in such an environment, isolation is often dangerous, with some countries being a testament to this. Testament means example. And maybe we can say with some communist countries being a testament to this. I can go with communist. I feel like it leads us to a certain direction. And I want to check how many words I have here. 100. Over here also 108. Okay. In the introduction we have 43. And I think I need one more sentence. The progress, right? And I want to maybe say, therefore, to have progress, it is now crucial to, let's say, it is now crucial to embrace, that's a good word, embrace globalization and establish necessary business connections. Business connections and economic connections. Maybe I should say both, and establish necessary business as well as economic connections. Right. So now, in the conclusion, I just have to summarize everything, I think, and we can say in conclusion, although some people believe, although some people believe that globalization um, prevents progress, comma, their view, let's say their view, I want to say wrong, but wrong is a very simple word for IELTS in this case. So I should say irrational, paranoid, maybe those, narrow. Probably that, maybe. Let's go ahead. In conclusion, although some people believe that globalization prevents progress, their view is irrational, based on how beneficial, based on how beneficial globalization can be, without connecting, right? Without connection with the rest of the world, a country cannot develop. And I already said economic sense, so maybe I should not repeat that. So without connection with the rest of the world, a country cannot develop properly, effectively. I'm going to say that. Effectively. There you go. So without connection with the rest of the world, a country cannot develop effectively. All right. And I should say, thus, I do believe that globalization is an important, beneficial, or advantageous, maybe? I should just say an advantageous phenomena. Phenomenon over here. Right. How many words do I have? I wonder. We will count this right now. 315, classic. I'm saying classic because most of the time students end up having around 300 words and having around, not around, but certainly two main bodies. More than 100 words here, more than 100 words here. If you look at it this way, this is a classic look. I usually don't do this that much because I prefer to have 3 or 4 main bodies. And if you ask me how I would split that in terms of coherence, I would say probably I would have a separate paragraph for healthcare and separate paragraph for the communication, for example. But today it's not necessary because I kind of connected them into a classic 2 main body approach right here. So what do we learn today? We learn that globalization is connection with other people, other businesses, other countries. Is it always beneficial? Maybe not, because some people would say that globalization means being too dependent on other countries. But we also learned that if you don't support globalization, and if you don't embrace globalization, you will be isolated. I feel that I did use that word today. This one, because isolation is when you say, I don't want to connect with you, I have my own culture, don't touch me at all, we're not going to do business with you. In some sense, you're protecting yourself, certainly. But this protection, if it becomes isolation, then certainly economic progress is difficult to achieve, with some communist countries being an example of that. So overall, it is inevitable, we can say, that you become a part of this globalization. And if you don't, then it turns into isolation. And that's an easy way to understand today's sample and to understand the concept of globalization that seems to be so important in the world of IELTS. Because like I said, or maybe I didn't, globalization is a common topic, not only in writing, but also in speaking and in reading. I remember lots of reading passages about the new connection, new technology in this world that we live in the 21st century.